The year is 1470. High in the mountains of northern Greece, in a valley people in the cities barely remember exists, a single bell tolls across the morning fog. It's the bell of the convent of St. Helena. For decades, it has marked the rhythm of quiet lives, prayer, work, silence, sleep. Today it rings for the last time. Inside the chapel, 21 women kneel shoulder to shoulder on cold stone. They whisper the same Latin prayers they have said since they first put on the veil. But something is different in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. For the first time, the words feel less like routine and more like farewell. Outside those walls, another sound rolls through the valley. Not thunder, not wind, drums. An army is moving through the mountains. Red standards crawl along the ridges like streaks of blood. The Ottoman frontier has finally reached this forgotten hillside. To the empire, St. Helena is nothing. A handful of women in a crumbling monastery. To the women inside, it is the entire world. Mother Marina, the abbess, sits closest to the altar. The silver crucifix in her hands once belonged to her grandmother. 3 generations have prayed into that piece of metal. Her fingers don't tremble because she's afraid. They tremble because she understands exactly what kind of power is walking up the mountain toward her. These women all know about death. They've nursed plague victims, buried parents, watched villages empty out in wars they never saw with their own eyes. Death they can face. What none of them are ready for is something worse. Being rewritten. Because what happens next is almost never described in school books. It doesn't fit cleanly into a timeline or a battle map. It lives in margins, in scattered letters, in ledgers no one was meant to read. What the Ottoman machine did to certain religious communities wasn't only conquest. It was a slow erasing of who people were. If you've ever wondered why some voices from history are loud and clear while others are almost impossible to hear, this is one of those missing stories. You're watching Crimson Historians. We work in the cracks of the archive. Mission reports that were never meant for publication. Ottoman administrative notes, forgotten testimonies locked in church libraries. Every time you watch, like, and share, it becomes a little harder for someone, somewhere, to push stories like this back into the dark. Now, back to the mountain. The bell at St. Helena stops ringing. The quiet that follows doesn't last. 17 years earlier, in 1453, a different bell tower had fallen silent. Constantinople, New Rome, the city that had stood for more than 1,000 years, collapsed in less than 2 months of artillery and siege, from the sea walls to the last gate. Eyewitnesses describe a city drowning in smoke and dust. The Hagia Sophia, the greatest church in the Christian world, became a symbol of everything that changed. Within hours of the final assault, soldiers tore down its great bronze doors. Within days, its bells were gone, its icons stripped from their frames. Within a week, the sound that rose from its dome was no longer a choir, but the call to prayer. Sultan Mehmed II stood under that vast painted ceiling and announced that the church would now be a mosque. Not because he desperately needed another place to worship, but because he understood something deeper. You don't truly defeat a people by killing them. You defeat them when you convince them their old world never really existed. Armies take territory, administrators take identity. From then on, when Mehmet looked west, he no longer saw just rebellious fortresses and unpaid taxes. He saw churches whose bells still rang in Latin, cloisters clinging to mountainsides, women in habits walking through conquered villages as if the old empire had not died at all. Each bell, each monastery, each nun was a reminder that Rome, however broken, refused to disappear. So the Ottomans developed a new habit: offer, then silence. Sometimes monasteries were turned into mosques. Sometimes they were abandoned and left to rot. Sometimes, quietly, the people inside were given a choice: accept the new order or leave the pages of history. Not as public martyrs. Martyrs inspire songs, legends, resistance. What the state increasingly wanted in strategic places was something else. People who didn't die. People who simply faded. By 1470, that tactic had been tested in Greek valleys, Serbian hillsides, Armenian towns in Anatolia. It never looked exactly the same twice. The details shift from source to source, but certain patterns repeat. At St. Helena, those patterns are about to close around 21 women who have never carried a sword. Their tools are rosaries, not weapons. Their discipline is silence, not combat. Mother Marina has led this community for 12 years. Before the veil, she was a village healer, tending fevers and childbirth in a town wiped out by plague when she was barely 20. The monastery wasn't an escape. It was the only place left where her questions might find an answer. Sister Katerina, not yet 20, joined after raiders killed her family on the coast. The calluses on her hands from farm work haven't completely faded. She still flinches when the wind slams a door. Sister Agatha is past 70. She has watched emperors rise and fall, flags change, coins replaced. But the psalms remain the same. Fear burned out of her years ago. What she fears now is forgetting the words. None of them have seen a cannon up close. They will soon. The first shot comes just after dawn. It doesn't hit the chapel. It hits the tower. Witnesses to other mountain sieges describe the sound of stone meeting iron as something almost supernatural, like the sky splitting. At St. Helena, the bell tower bursts into dust and fragments. The old bronze bell, which has marked every morning for more than a century, tears free of its beam in mid-swing and explodes into jagged shards. Pieces of metal rain down on the courtyard where chamomile and sage used to grow. The same hands that once crushed herbs for medicine now clamp over ears, shaking. Smoke rolls past the open cloister walk. Bits of stone sting faces and hands. Mother Marina doesn't scream. She raises the crucifix high enough for the others to see and begins to sing, Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. The words are thin against the echo of artillery. But one voice becomes three become 10. Soon 21 voices are pouring Latin into the ruined courtyard, while the mountains answer with cannon thunder. Armies don't stop moving because someone starts a hymn. By midday, the convent gate is hanging off one hinge. Ottoman troops step into the courtyard. Their swords are in their belts. Their ink is ready. Several officers spread out, each with a leather ledger. One unrolls a neat scroll, another dips a reed pen into ink. They start counting. Buildings, livestock, human beings. To them, this isn't a holy place. It's a column of numbers. Translator stands beside them. Local Greek, local accent, eyes fixed on the ground. His job is to turn imperial formula into words the sisters will understand. He reads from the decree, his voice unsteady. By order of the Sultan, all subjects of the newly conquered territories owe obedience to the sublime state. Those who accept the faith and rule of the Sultan will be granted protection. Those who resist will be treated as rebels. Mother Marina steps forward. Dust streaks her veil. Her face is calm in a way that makes some of the younger soldiers nervous. She doesn't look at the officer. She looks at the translator, speaking in clear Greek. Tell him we already belong to a king. We have nothing else to give. The officer overseeing the operation, Iskender Bey, a commander whose name appears in campaign records from Thessaly that year, does not shout, does not curse. He smiles, because this is familiar. He has seen monks and nuns in other valleys stand just as firm, and he believes he knows how long that firmness lasts. That night, the sisters are sealed inside their own chapel. No food, no water, no lamp, just the faint glow leaking in from the corridor. Outside, life continues. Soldiers joke, fires crackle, an army settles in. Inside, two of the youngest women break first, not in faith, but in composure. Their sobs bounce off the vaulted ceiling and come back louder than they sounded leaving the throat. Sister Katerina, voice hoarse from dust and singing, whispers the words she remembers from childhood. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Her voice wavers, falls, starts again. Even if I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. One by one, other voices pick up the fragments. No one is comfortable. No one is at peace. But the panic eases. The very disciplines outsiders mocked, fasting, vigils, long nights of prayer, have quietly trained these women for exactly this kind of pressure. What the soldiers think is torture, they recognize as an intensified version of the life they already chose. Iskender Bey waits. He's done this before. Somewhere in another archive, in different ink, historians have found a phrase attributed to an Ottoman officer. Conviction burns brightest just before it goes out. On the second day, the chapel door opens. A servant sets down a low table with bread and a pitcher of water. Fresh, clean, fragrant. He does not say a word. He does not need to. Every throat in the room feels like sandpaper. Knees shake when the women stand. They look to Mother Marina. Sister Agatha speaks before anyone else can. They want us to thank them, she rasps, to need them. Marina nods once. Then we hunger. No one touches the food. By the third night, lips are cracked, hands tremble. Some of the sisters can barely stay upright. Katerina's vision blurs at the edges. But no one has spoken the words the state wants to hear. Out in the courtyard, Iskender Bey watches the chapel's narrow window, arms folded, jaw tight. Maybe he is impressed. Maybe he is bored. The sources don't say. What we know is this: he doesn't change the plan. On the third day, the door opens again. This time, it isn't a servant. Iskender steps inside with the translator half a step behind. "You are not enemies," he says in Turkish. "You are not criminals. You are wrong." The translator passes the words along. The Sultan is generous. He offers new names, new homes, new lives. Say the words, and the road ahead will be soft. He lets the promise hang in the air. Refuse, and you may still travel with us to the capital to plead your stubbornness in his own court. He shrugs. But the journey is hard. The Froil do not finish it. It is not a threat screamed in rage. It's simple logistics. Marina looks along the line of women. Some are praying silently. Some stare at the floor. Some are doing both. Then she looks back at him. "We will walk," she says. The answer surprises almost no one. The smile returns to his face. Then, at dawn, we go. Night comes. The sisters press close together in the dark. No one speaks loudly. No one has the strength. Somewhere in the cluster of bodies, Katerina hums a hymn under her breath. Voices join, break, join again. Outside, a guard leans against the door. He will later tell his grandson, according to a much later oral account, about the night he heard women sing as if they were already on the other side of death. That story never made it into any state chronicle. But stories like that never entirely die either. Dawn. 21 women step out of the chapel. Their hands are tied in front of them with coarse rope. They carry nothing else. No icons, no books. What they own now lives in memory. They walk south toward the coast. No wagon accompanies them. If they collapse, there is nowhere to lie but the road itself. The soldiers ride and walk alongside, not hurried. The journey is part of the punishment. The sun over Thessaly doesn't care who it burns. By the second day, Sister Irene, 62 and long troubled by bad joints, crumples in the dust. She tries to push herself up. Her knees refuse. The column keeps moving. Katerina and another sister, Anna, hoist Irene between them and stagger forward, carrying more weight than their bodies should. That night, they lower her onto the ground. She doesn't wake again. At first light, the sisters scrape at the roadside soil with bare hands until the earth gives just enough to cover a body. No psalm is sung loudly, but lips move. From a distance, soldiers watch. Iskender adds a line to his notes. 20 remain. 2 days later, another woman simply stops. She sits down in the middle of the path, folds her hands in her lap, closes her eyes. She will never open them again. The column does not return for her. By the time the party reaches the port city of Demetria 7 days after leaving the mountain, 17 women are still walking. Something else has changed. There are no more tears, no more pleading. The sisters don't look at the officers when they pass. They walk in a quiet that feels less like surrender and more like a decision already made. On the last morning before they board the ship, Iskender sends for Mother Marina. She is brought to his tent alone. Ottoman documents say nothing about what happens in that meeting. What we have is a merchant's letter, written decades later, based on the testimony of a Venetian who claimed to have been there. In his words, they led her back at daybreak dressed in rich cloth, veiled in silk the color of pomegranates. Her body moved because hands guided it. Her eyes were open, but they looked at nothing. When I passed close, her lips moved. No sound came out, yet I saw the shape of Latin words. They called her a convert. To me, she looked like someone whose soul had been left somewhere her body could not follow. The Ottomans didn't just want bodies. They wanted useful bodies. Compliant, loyal, emptied, and refilled. A dead nun might inspire songs. A broken one, standing, serving, silent, tells a different story. This is what happens if you resist. From that morning onward, Marina walks with the others. Her feet move, her hands lift when commanded. But no sister ever hears her speak again. At Demetrius, the women are herded onto a war galley. Long, low, all muscle and wood and iron. Chains wait where benches should be. A surviving manifest from a similar ship lists female religious captives, not by name, just quantity and destination. Imperial household, domestic service, conversion. The word service covers many possibilities. The voyage to Constantinople takes almost 2 weeks. The sea punishes everyone equally. Waves slam the hull, spray burns cracked lips with salt. Below deck, air goes bad quickly. Chains bite wrists and ankles when the ship rises and falls. At night, over the slap of water and creak of wood, Katerina whispers scripture into the gloom. Her voice is too small to compete with the storm. It doesn't need to. The prisoners closest to her, Greeks, Serbs, Italians, others taken in different campaigns, shift to listen. For a few breaths at a time, the sea seems to hold still. When the galley finally veers into the Bosphorus, the sky clears. The first sight of the capital is knife-sharp. Walls layered on walls. Markets packed near the shoreline. Slender minarets clawing upward beside ancient domes. The city people once called the desire of the world gleams in pale morning light like polished steel. For these women, it will be less a prize than a lock. From the docks, the chain of captives winds through steep streets. Spice, sweat, incense, and smoke mix in the air. Crowds watch them pass. Even in a city built on conquest, fully veiled Christian nuns in chains are unusual. This parade is meant to be seen. They pass under archways built in Roman times and through new courtyards planted for Ottoman tastes. Gardens murmur with fountains and the screams of peacocks. Then the procession stops in a square from which the great dome of Hagia Sophia dominates everything. Once, it was the center of the Christian world. Now, from its minarets, the call to prayer spills like water over stone. The women are forced to kneel facing it. One of the sisters whispers in Greek, barely audible, "We are home, and it belongs to someone else." After that, there are no more public displays. They are taken toward the palace. The public Topkapi, the one tourists walk today, has glittering tiles and carefully raked gravel sunlit courtyards gold. The route the nuns take goes the other way. Down. Stone steps spiral into the bedrock. The air cools and thickens. Walls sweat. Torches throw light that never reaches the ceiling. Palaces need more than thrones and gardens. They need storage rooms, kitchens, cellars, servant corridors, networks no visitor ever sees. In some of those blind corners, something happened no official architect ever put on a floor plan. If you're still here, it's because some part of you already knows this kind of story shouldn't be left alone. This isn't about glorifying suffering. It's about listening to people who were meant to vanish. Beneath Topkapi, there is a warren of rooms historians are still mapping. In the far reaches of one of those levels, behind what appeared to be a solid wall, a team restoring the palace in 2011 broke through old plaster and brick. Behind it, they found a chamber roughly the size of a village chapel, but with no altar niche, no furniture, no paint. Just bare stone scarred by hundreds of tiny cuts. When archaeologists brought in stronger lights and photographed the walls at an angle, the shapes became clear. Crosses, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Some barely scratches, some carved deep enough to outlast centuries of damp. Under one cluster, in shaky Latin, 4 words: Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. Whatever this room had been before, it was used as a chapel by people who were never supposed to have one. Ottoman records speak vaguely of palace servants from the faith of the Romans, assigned to laundry, kitchens, and fire tending. Cross-referencing dates. Some historians believe the women from St. Helena may have been among them, even if this precise link can't be proven beyond doubt. The pattern fits. Picture their lives. By day, they scrubbed floors they were not allowed to pray on. They carried water through halls where decisions were made that shaped half the world, and never once looked a vizier in the eye. At night, after fires were banked and doors barred, a handful of them slipped down into that hidden room. No priest, no choir, no incense, just memory. They rebuilt the liturgy from what they could remember, psalm by psalm, line by half-forgotten line. Bread stolen from the kitchens became a symbol. Water from the cistern became something more. A shard of broken mirror, mounted on the wall, turned into a crude cross. A bit of cloth became an altar. Every night they returned, they scratched another cross into the stone. Sister Katerina, the young woman who whispered psalms on the ship, would have been in her 20s by then. The team that uncovered the chamber found low in one corner a small carved bird next to a vertical row of lines. 21 strokes. Some cut deep, some only begun before the tool slipped. The last 10 strokes stop halfway. Did each mark stand for a sister, a year, a vow? No document explains it. But we can say this much. Whoever made those lines did not believe she was alone. A Venetian hostage writing from the palace in the 1470s mentions, almost as an aside, hearing women's voices in the language of the Latins, echoing up through stone on certain nights, as if a choir were buried somewhere beneath his cell. For centuries, scholars treated that line like a ghost story. The chamber says otherwise. Not everything in that room is neatly comforting. The crosses cluster thick around the doorway and then thin out. In some places, the lines become frantic, gouged, almost angry. Then they stop entirely. Ledger entries from the early 1480s refer to a purification of the household staff by a new sultan. No names, no burial place. Just one cool word: removed. However, the story ended for the women who scratched those marks. Their work outlived them. The Ottoman Empire ruled for nearly 600 years, spanning 3 continents. It redrew maps, changed languages, reshaped trade routes, and left architecture that still defines skylines. Yet in the end, much of what we know about the human cost of its power comes not from decrees on illuminated paper, but from things like this. Crosses a hand's breadth tall, carved in a stolen moment. A phrase in Latin that refused to fade entirely. At one point, a French diplomat visiting the palace in the early 1700s recorded a rumor among older servants. Stand alone in the lowest halls on certain nights, they said, and you might feel a chill and hear women singing words you did not understand. He chalked it up to superstition. The walls, once again, quietly disagreed. When conservators examined residue on the floor of the hidden chapel, they found traces of wax mixed with herbs, like the candles convent women were known to make in Greece in the 1400s. If that analysis is correct, it means the vigil lasted far longer than officials ever intended. Not days, not weeks, years. Think about what that means. Night after night, women who were cut off from their homes, stripped of their names, given work meant to grind them down, kept returning to a place no one had authorized them to create. They kept carving crosses long after some of their number disappeared from the lines. Hope should have died. It didn't. This isn't just a story about religion. It's about power and memory. The Ottoman state could take land, control trade, repurpose cathedrals, and reorder entire societies. What it couldn't quite reach was the stubborn decision of a handful of people to keep their story alive without ever writing it down. History, as we're usually taught, is written by those who win. Memory is different. Memory is written by whoever keeps scratching at the wall the longest. Sometimes that looks like a monument in a capital city. Sometimes it looks like a 4-word sentence hidden in an underground room for 5 centuries. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. The line comes from the opening of the Gospel of John. For the women who carved it, who almost certainly knew they would die in that palace, it was less a pious slogan and more a dare thrown at the universe. You can chain hands, you can reroute cities, you can erase names from ledgers and drop bodies into unmarked pits. You cannot stop light from existing, and you cannot control what a stranger will feel 2, 3, 500 years later when that light finally reaches them. That stranger, right now, is you. In 2011, when the restoration team at Topkapi stepped back from their floodlights and realized what they'd found, one of the archaeologists reportedly asked a simple question. How long did they stay? The answer, buried in wax traces and depth of cuts, seems to be longer than anyone expected. Long enough that an empire fell and the marks remained. Today, tourists walk above that place, snapping photos, checking maps, hurrying to the next viewpoint. Most will never know what's under their feet. The empire that brought the Sisters of St. Helena, or women very like them, to that room is gone. Its banners are museum pieces now, but the crosses are still there. The bird in the corner is still there. The Latin phrase, faded but readable, is still there. Those women were supposed to dissolve into the machinery of a palace and be forgotten. They failed spectacularly. Because you know about them now. You chose to listen. As long as someone keeps telling the story, the erasing never fully works. You've just walked through one of the darker corridors of the 15th century. If this kind of story reminds you how fragile human beings are, and how hard some of them still fought to remain themselves, stay with crimson historians. We can't change what happened to them, but we can refuse to let silence have the last word. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness in the end does not win.